Welcome to FearSpiral. In the distance, a train whistle blew, lonely and mournful. Alina opened her eyes, startled. Had she imagined it? Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the window panes. Now, why did she feel like someone was watching her? She sat up, scanning the room in the darkness. Moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. Was this place really her inheritance? What had her uncle, a renowned archaeologist, been hiding here all these years? Carefully, she got out of bed, her bare feet padding softly on the wooden floor. As she moved around the room, she noticed a change in the shadows cast by the moonlight. Something was different now. It was as if the room itself was observing her every move. Alina stopped, her heart pounding. Could she be losing her mind? After all, she'd inherited more than just this house. She'd also inherited her uncle's research, his obsession with ancient civilizations and their myths. Had he uncovered something he wasn't supposed to find? Was that why he'd kept this place a secret, hidden away from the world? Suddenly, the floorboard under her feet creaked again, and she jumped, knocking over a nearby table. In the ensuing silence, she could hear her own breathing, her pulse echoing in her ears. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw it. A shadow, dark and imposing, detached itself from the wall. Panic surged through her. Was she dreaming? Was this some cruel trick of the moonlight? Or was there a real presence in the room with her, watching her every move? As it drew closer, she could make out the shape of a man, tall and gaunt, his face obscured by the darkness. He seemed to glide across the room, silent and menacing, until he loomed over her, his eyes burning like embers in the gloom. Alina screamed, scrambling back as the figure reached out a hand, his touch icy cold. She stumbled, falling to the ground, her camera clattering away, and then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished. Alina lay there, trembling, as the moonlight faded and the shadows retreated. When the first rays of sunlight touched the room, she got up, shaken but determined. She wasn't going to let fear drive her out. This house might hold secrets, but she was here to uncover them. Wiping the sweat from her brow, she walked to the window and looked out at the rising sun. It was a new day, and she was determined to see it through. Whatever secrets this house held, she was determined to find out. It was the middle of the night when Alina woke up shivering. The blanket had fallen to the floor somehow. She remembered tucking herself in tightly before closing her eyes. But now the only thing keeping her warm was the thin sheet that covered her like a shroud. The room was freezing cold. She could see her own breath in the air. But the windows were shut tight and the radiator was turned up as high as it would go. Then she heard it again, the whisper that had woken her in the first place. It was soft, almost like a sigh, and it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. She reached for her phone and fumbled for the light. 3:17 a.m., the same time as the frozen clock downstairs. She glanced at the door. In the pale moonlight, she could have sworn it trembled, like the doorknob was being turned. But when she got up and walked over to it, nothing had changed. The whisper came again, louder this time, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. This time she made out the words, "Don't fall asleep." Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps in the hallway, getting closer. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she stood frozen, staring at the door. It rattled, she screamed, then recoiled as the footsteps stopped outside her door. They were right outside her door. Then she heard the whisper again, but this time it wasn't just one voice. It was many voices, all speaking at once, all tangled in a low hiss. She stumbled back and fell against the wall, pressing her back against the cool surface. She tried to make herself small, to disappear. She squeezed her eyes shut and waited. When she finally dared to open them again, the room was silent. The only sound was the thump, thump, thump of her own heart. She wanted to scream, to run, but she couldn't. She stood rooted to the spot, staring at the door, watching it. When the knob trembled, she cried out and took a step back. It trembled again, then turned. A sliver of moonlight slipped under the door and inched across the floor. Alina gasped as she saw something dark emerge from the crack, something tall and thin. She raised her hands, her nails digging into her palms. "Who's there?" she whispered, her voice cracking against the silence. The footsteps came closer. Something dragged metal moans. Then the door creaked open and Alina screamed. She swung her flashlight wildly, the beam dancing across the room, illuminating dust motes and peeling wallpaper and the cracked mirror in the corner. Nothing. The light hit the mirror and she froze. There in the glass, illuminated by the silvery beam, stood her reflection. But it wasn't her. It was her face, yes. But the eyes were closed like she was fast asleep. The reflection yawned, stretching out its arms, and Alina screamed again and dropped the flashlight. By the time she picked it up, the reflection was normal again, just her pale, terrified face staring back at her. Alina didn't sleep again that night, huddled in the corner by the window, watching the grey light of dawn creep through the blinds. When the first hint of sunlight touched the floor, she saw it. Etched into the wood beside her bed were 3 words carved deep into the grain. She swore it hadn't been there the night before. Don't fall asleep.
Elena hadn't slept. The words on the floor haunted her more than the whispers. Every time she blinked, she saw them carved in her mind. Don't fall asleep. By morning, she convinced herself it must have been her imagination. Maybe some old graffiti from a previous owner, something she hadn't noticed before. She tried to laugh it off, but her laugh cracked and died in the empty house. Downstairs, she made coffee. The smell gave her a moment of comfort until she heard it. The slow inhale and exhale. At first, she thought it was wind seeping through the cracks. But no, it was steady, rhythmic, breathing. The walls were breathing. She pressed her hand against the wallpaper. It expanded under her touch, warm and alive, then deflated like lungs emptying. Elena jerked back, spilling coffee down her wrist. No, she whispered, shaking her head. This is not real. But then she saw the wallpaper rippling, as if something inside the walls shifted beneath it, pressing out, testing the boundary between house and skin. Her phone buzzed, startling her. An unknown number. She answered with trembling fingers. Elena. The voice on the line was her own. Her blood turned to ice. She yanked the phone from her ear and stared at the screen. The call had ended. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. Then a laugh. Faint, childlike, coming from upstairs. Heart hammering, Elena grabbed a heavy candlestick and climbed the staircase. With each step, the laughter grew clearer, sharper, echoing in her skull. She pushed open the first door, nothing but dust. Second door, empty closet. She reached the end of the hall, the door she hadn't opened yet. The laughter stopped. Her hand trembled on the knob. She pushed it open. Inside was a small room with a single child's bed, rusted springs poking through the mattress. The wallpaper here was different. Scribbles drawn into it with something dark, almost red. Faces. Dozens of faces. Each one with their eyes closed. And then, one by one, the faces in the wallpaper opened their eyes and stared at her. Elena staggered back. The door slammed shut on its own, throwing her into darkness. And in the pitch black, the voices whispered together, clear this time, not just in her ears, but inside her head. The house is awake. The flickering candlelight danced in Elena's eyes, casting grotesque shadows that writhed on the walls like tormented souls. She clutched the iron candlestick tighter, its reassuring weight a feeble comfort in the suffocating darkness. The room was a suffocating darkness. She could feel its oppressive presence pressing down on her, amplifying the pounding of her heart, the frantic beating of her heart. Then she heard them, the whispery murmurs that sent shivers down her spine. The childlike voices circled her in the darkness. Elena clawed at the door, her nails scraping uselessly against the wood. "Let me out!" she screamed, her voice cracking. Something shifted behind her. A shuffle, tiny footsteps. She spun around, raising the candlestick like a weapon. Nothing. Just black. Then, a pair of eyes opened in the corner of the room. Small, glowing faintly white. Another set opened beside it. Then another, and another, until the entire wall seemed to be staring back at her, dozens of pale, lidless eyes. The laughter returned, high-pitched and cruel. She swung the candlestick at the nearest eye. The metal hit the wall with a dull thud, but the wall pulsed like flesh. The eye blinked shut, then burst open again, angrier now, blood-red veins spreading across the wallpaper. The bed creaked. Slowly, it shifted toward her on its own, dragging across the wooden floor with a deafening screech. Elena pressed herself against the wall, her breath shallow and ragged. "This isn't real," she whispered. "This isn't..." The mattress collapsed inward, forming a gaping hole in the shape of a mouth. From inside, something began to crawl out. A hand. Small, gray, fingers far too long. Then another hand gripped the frame. A child's face emerged, hollow-eyed, skin stretched tight like parchment. "Play with us," it whispered, its jaw unhinging too wide. Elena screamed and swung the candlestick again, this time hitting the creature's head. It snapped sideways with a sickening crack, but the thing only laughed louder, its mouth tearing wider until it split its cheeks. The door burst open on its own. She didn't hesitate. Elena sprinted out into the hallway, her feet pounding against the floorboards. She ran down the stairs 2 at a time, the laughter chasing her, echoing from every corner of the house. But when she reached the front door and yanked it open, she froze. There was no outside. Where her front yard should have been, there was only more hallway. The same peeling wallpaper, the same creaking floorboards. She stumbled back, her chest heaving. The house wasn't just haunted, it had swallowed her whole. This happened to me when I was little. I don't remember much, just that my dad left us and Mom got really sad. Then we got this house. It was big and old, and there were so many rooms, so many hallways. I was exploring one day and found this one room. It was all locked up. I remember trying to open the door and it just kept opening. And then inside was this one single bulb hanging from the ceiling, and it was just buzzing. I remember touching the glass and it was really hot, like flesh. And then I saw the reflection of my hand, but it didn't look right. Like it was translucent, like skin over bone. And then I screamed because the reflection started to scream and it didn't sound like me. And then the door slammed shut. I told my mom about it, but she didn't really care. She said, "Don't go in there," but didn't lock the door or put up a barrier or anything. So I kept going back. I even tried to break the glass, but it was unbreakable. And then I would stand there and scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. It was like my voice box was locked up. Then one day I was in there and the lights flickered, and then this woman appeared in front of me. She was really pale and gaunt, and she looked at me and she didn't say anything. She just pointed to the door and then she disappeared. I went through the door, and it was a hallway, and it stretched on forever. And there were all these windows, but none of them had any glass. They were just empty sockets. I remember reaching out and my fingers went straight through, and then I heard this buzzing sound and it was coming from one of the windows. And I looked and there was this red light coming from outside. And then a voice said, "Let me in." So I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. And then I started to burn and I thought maybe it was the sun, but then I looked up and it was nighttime. I ran from the window, but there was nowhere to go. All the doors were gone and all the walls were closing in, and I remember thinking, how can I hide? Where can I go? And then I found this closet, and I remember squeezing in the smallest space between the wall and the shelves, curling up into a ball and thinking maybe it would protect me, but it didn't. Because then the walls started shaking, and the closet door started to open, and this voice kept saying, "Let me in, let me in, let me in." And then it stopped. When I opened my eyes, I was in my room, sitting up in bed, and I remember thinking, thank God, it's just a dream. But then I saw this red mark on my arm, and it looked like a handprint. And then I knew. Dolls whispering filled the room. The sound crawled under Elena's skin like insects. She backed against the door, but it was sealed tight. The handle was gone as if it had never existed. "Stay forever," they whispered. "Stay forever." The dolls climbed down from the shelves. Their porcelain faces cracked with each step. Their eyes rolled in different directions, glass clicking against the sockets. Elena snatched one up and smashed it against the wall. It shattered into pieces, but the shards twitched and wriggled like insects, crawling back together. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, panicked breaths. She had to think. She had to fight. The wallpaper peeled on its own, curling like dry skin. Beneath it, the wall wasn't wood or plaster. It was raw, pulsing flesh, veins glowing faintly with a sickly green light. Elena gagged, bile rising in her throat. The walls weren't walls at all. The house was alive and hungry. The floor beneath her feet heaved, rippling like muscle. She stumbled as it buckled, throwing her toward the bed. The mattress split open in the middle, revealing rows of jagged teeth lining the seams. It wanted to swallow her. She grabbed the metal lamp by the bedside and swung it at the wall. Sparks flew as the bulb shattered, plunging the room into darkness. But for a moment, The walls recoiled, shrieking with a sound like thousands of voices crying at once. Her ears rang. Blood trickled from her nose. "Elena!" The voice came again. But this time it wasn't her father. It was deeper, layered, like 1,000 mouths speaking in unison. "Elena, you are mine now." She pressed her hands over her ears, shaking her head violently. "No, I'm not yours. I'm not—" The floor split open, a gaping wound filled with writhing tendrils of flesh and shadow. They lashed upward, coiling around her ankles, dragging her down inch by inch. She screamed and tore at them, her nails breaking, skin ripping, but the tendrils only tightened. She swung the lamp again, smashing it into the tendrils. They shrieked, releasing her long enough for her to scramble to the far corner of the room. She pressed her back against the wall, panting, shaking. And then, silence. The tendrils slid back into the floor, the walls smoothed, almost calm, as if nothing had happened. The house was playing with her, testing her. And somewhere deep inside, she realized a horrifying truth. This house wasn't haunted by spirits. It was the spirit, a predator, a parasite, and she was its prey. And Elena staggered into the hallway, her body trembling, skin clammy with sweat. The air was thick, heavy, pressing down on her lungs like smoke. The house was quiet now, too quiet. The silence wasn't peace. It was a predator's silence, the pause before it struck again. She forced herself to move, barefoot steps padding against the cold wood. Doors stretched endlessly down the corridor, identical, repeating, like a mirror that never ended. Her heart hammered in her chest. She chose one at random and shoved it open. Sunlight spilled in. Her backyard. She froze, staring. The smell of grass, the chirping of cicadas, the distant hum of cars from the street. It was all there, the normal world. Elena staggered outside, her chest filling with hope. She ran barefoot across the lawn, sobbing, laughing, not caring that her feet bled from rocks hidden in the grass. She was free. She was out. Her neighbors stood across the street, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, smiling, waving. "Elena," Mrs. Henderson called cheerfully. "You made it out." But her smile was too wide, too fixed. Elena slowed, her laughter dying. The Hendersons' faces began to ripple, their eyes melting like wax, their mouths stretched wider, splitting ear to ear. "Elena, come back inside." Her blood ran cold. The street crumbled beneath her feet, grass peeling away like paint, revealing flesh, beating, pulsing flesh. The sky above twisted, clouds folding in on themselves until they became the ceiling of her bedroom once more. The lawn, the neighbors, the sun. It was all a lie, an illusion. She was still inside. Elena fell to her knees, clawing at her hair, screaming in frustration. The house was mocking her, dangling freedom in front of her only to tear it away. A voice whispered in her ear, though no one was there. "You cannot leave me, Elena. You are part of me now." Her fingernails dug into the wooden floor, splinters stabbing into her skin. "No, no," she screamed. "You won't have me." The hallway stretched again, twisting like a snake, doors opening and closing on their own. Some revealed endless black voids. Others showed distorted reflections of her, grinning, whispering secrets she couldn't hear. She stumbled backward until she pressed against the wall. Her breathing came in ragged bursts, her vision swimming. Somewhere deep inside she knew, the only way out wasn't through the doors. The only way out might be through the heart of the house itself. Night had a way of stretching longer inside that house. Every second felt stretched into minutes, and every creak of the wooden floor above echoed like thunder. Daniel had almost stopped breathing, listening, waiting. The whispers that once filled the air were silent now, as though the house itself held its breath with him. Lena sat beside him, trembling, her eyes darting between the staircase and the dark hallway that led deeper into the mansion. The fire in their lantern flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and move on their own. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It stopped. Do you hear it? It stopped." Daniel nodded, but inside his stomach twisted. The silence wasn't safety. It was the calm before something worse. He had felt it before. on nights when storms broke suddenly over his hometown. The stillness was a lie. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, though neither of them had wound it. Slowly the hands moved backward, the second hand twitching like it fought against invisible fingers. "Don't look at it," Daniel muttered, pulling Lena's chin away. But she had already seen, and her face paled until it was ghostly. Then the house breathed. It was deep and guttural, a low vibration that made dust drift from the beams above. The walls seemed to flex in and out, like the lungs of some massive beast. Lena clutched Daniel's arm, digging her nails in. "It's alive," she said, her voice shaking. "This place is alive." A door slammed upstairs, then another, then all of them, one by one, as though unseen footsteps walked the length of the hall. Each slam was closer, descending, until the last door, their door, creaked open by itself. The lantern sputtered and went out. In total darkness, Daniel's hand reached for Lena's, but it brushed only empty air. "Lena!" His voice cracked. No answer. He turned in the dark, heart pounding, when a faint glow appeared at the far end of the hall. Not the lantern, not fire, but two pale, luminous shapes. Eyes, watching, unblinking. And then, Lena's voice, but warped, broken, coming from the darkness. "Daniel, don't close your eyes tonight. The house is waiting." The floor beneath his feet shuddered, boards bowing downward, as though something massive moved below. Daniel realized the truth in that moment. He hadn't been trapped inside the house. He had been swallowed by it. And now, it was digesting him. They ran, crashing through the undergrowth, branches whipping at their faces. The oppressive silence of the woods broken only by their ragged breaths and the pounding of their hearts. Daniel's breathing was ragged as he leaned against the splintered doorway of the mansion. His flashlight flickered weakly, its dim beam cutting through the swirling mist that now filled every corridor. Lena stood beside him, clutching the lantern so tightly her knuckles were white, its glow trembling as though it too was afraid. The house was no longer silent. It groaned, moaned, and whispered with 1,000 voices at once. The walls pulsed, as if the house had veins and blood. Shadows darted across the hall, too quick to belong to anything human. "We can't outrun it," Lena whispered, her voice cracking. "This place, it doesn't want us to leave, it wants us inside, forever." Daniel forced himself upright, blood streaking down his temple. "Then we don't run. We end it. Right here. Right now." They stumbled toward the heart of the mansion, the room with the cracked mirror, the one that had been whispering to Daniel since the first night. The door creaked open like a scream, revealing the mirror fractured into countless shards, each reflecting not their faces, but distorted versions, dead versions, broken, screaming, clawing at the glass as if trying to break free. The whispers grew louder, swelling into a roar. "Look at yourselves. You are already mine." The mirror shuddered. Hands, pale, clawed, skeletal, began pushing through the cracks, reaching for them. Lena gasped and held up the lantern. Its glow flared, brighter than before, almost holy. The shadowy hands recoiled, shrieking. Daniel grabbed a jagged piece of wood from the floor, his eyes burning with defiance. "You've haunted us enough. You've taken enough." He hurled the wood straight into the mirror. The glass exploded. A thunderous scream shook the entire mansion, shaking its foundations. The whispers turned to howls of rage and pain. The walls bled black ichor, pouring like rivers, the house collapsing around them. "Run!" Daniel shouted, grabbing Lena's hand. They sprinted through the collapsing halls, dodging falling beams and shattering walls. The whispers clawed at their ears, desperate, vengeful, begging them not to leave. But then, silence. The moment they crossed the threshold of the front door, the mansion behind them imploded in a deafening roar, collapsing into ash and dust. No trace of it remained, only the barren field where it once had stood. Daniel and Lena fell to their knees, gasping, trembling. They were alive, but the silence felt unnatural. Lena turned slowly. Behind them, in the pile of dust where the house had stood, a single object remained, a mirror shard. And in its reflection, Daniel's face. But not the Daniel standing there. This reflection was smiling. The shard whispered softly, "We're not finished." The screen fades to black. And so the house crumbled, but evil never truly dies. The mirror's whisper still lingers, waiting for the next soul who dares to listen. I'm sorry, what was that? You want a sequel? Well then, let me tell you a story about a girl who didn't listen to her friends. A girl who stumbled upon an old, dusty mirror in an antique shop. A mirror that whispered secrets to her, promises of power and glory. But as she gazed into its depths, she became trapped in its deadly embrace. If you think you're safe from the whispers now, if you think you can hide from the evil that's coming for you, then you'd be wrong. Because the mirror's whispers can reach even the darkest corners of your mind. And once it gets a hold of you, it will never let you go. So remember this. Some stories don't end when the screen fades to black. They just begin.
Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps me out.